My son's best friend came from a troubled home and I was asked to foster him. Wow, that's a big commitment, big ask. I have one son, Henry, age 12. Henry is best friends with a boy named Archie, age 14. It has always been clear that Archie comes from a troubled home. From what I can gather, and I do not have the full information, Archie's mom is a user of illicit substances, and Archie has been on the at-risk register for a long while. Honestly, I don't know why it has taken them this long to decide he's being moved to foster care. I was told that the school had recommended me and asked to see if I could take him in. They said it would likely be long-term until he turns 18. I honestly didn't know what to say. I was in shock. I have been unofficially supporting Archie for a while now. I pick him up from his house and drop him off at school with my son. He spends a lot of weekends at my place. On days when he doesn't come to my place, I make sure to pack him something to eat when I pick him up because he told me that his school lunch is his only meal most days. I buy him soap and deodorant and I even wash his clothes for him. But supporting however I can and taking him on fully is a big jump. I'm a single dad. I have a decent job, but I'm far from well off. I live in a small 2-bedroom house, meaning Henry and Archie would have to share a room, which they do now when Archie stays, but it's only for short bursts. Plus, there's the responsibility of taking on another human. I was told that they had a lack of foster cares in the local area, so if I didn't agree to take him, it is likely that he would have to move counties and schools. I don't want that. I was already having Archie stay with me for the 2-week Christmas holiday, so I asked if I could think about it and give him the firm answer in the new year. They agreed. Archie has not yet been informed about any of this. I've tried to make this a normal Christmas for him as much as possible. My heart is telling me, of course you're going to take that little boy in, but my brain is worried about the responsibility and cost of taking on another mouth to feed, another boy to clothe. At the same time, I keep thinking about Archie's situation. He has already had such a rough start in life, and I know that he needs stability and care more than anything else. I can't bear the thought of him being uprooted again, losing his school, his friends, and the small semblance of normality he has here. I keep asking myself if I can really give him what he needs, and I don't know if I have all the answers right now. I've always taught Henry the importance of kindness, and I see how much he cares about Archie too. Part of me feels that this might not just be me taking on more responsibility, it's about giving him the chance to grow up with a sense of love and belonging. So I suppose I'm left balancing what's practical with what feels right in my heart. And I'm leaning towards saying yes. I spoke to my own mom about it, and she thinks it's an awful idea. She's worried I'm biting off more than I can chew, especially as a single dad. She reminded me that I already have a ton on my plate with work, the house, and raising Henry on my own. She said that taking in another child, especially one with a difficult background, would add stress and might affect my ability to provide for Henry properly. She didn't say it outright, but I could tell she's afraid this might make life harder for all of us, including Archie. I understand her concerns. Honestly, I do. But I can't imagine just turning him away when he needs help the most. I told her that I haven't made a final decision yet, but that I need to think about what's best for everyone involved, not just what's easiest. And I haven't even discussed any of this with Henry yet, which will be a huge factor in my final decision. This has been a huge rant, and if you've read it, thank you. I just needed to get this out somehow. And there are some comments, some relevant comments. DFPHD says, couple of thoughts. It's 4 years. Like, obviously kids need support well beyond 18 if you can provide it. But if you can get that kid to graduate high school, you would already be a saint and nothing more could be expected of you. So it's not forever. Also, once that kid is 16, he can start working and help around the house more legitimately. Both things are not just for your benefit, but also great things for him to learn. Ask social services what additional resources you'd have access to if you were to foster. For example, here where I live, foster kids qualify for free school lunches. So that's a cost you don't have to incur. I would also find a local foster parent group, as I'm sure there are other resources available that may not even be ran by the state. Real talk, if it was me, I would do it as long as I didn't think that Archie would be a danger to Henry. Like, unless you think Archie could be violent, etc. Something like that. That makes a lot of sense.
That makes sense.
Yeah, because that is a difficulty with taking in foster kids. It's like, because they come from a difficult home, they obviously have difficult behavior that might show up.
And frameworks they approach things.
Yeah, and like coping mechanisms for emotions and stuff like that. So that can come up. If he's a good kid, I would do everything in my power to make that happen. I would set up a GoFundMe if necessary. I would try to lean on my friends and family to help. Also, depending on what your job is, I would ask if they can help in any way. I say this as someone who works for a giant company. Yes, I would worry, but a 14-year-old kid in foster care is not something I'd be able to let happen to a kid I care about. Another comment, caffeine please, says, I'm a single dad to 2 foster children. Started much the same way. Was asked to take in a youth of a friend of the family's. I've been fostering for a few years now. It's by far one of the best decisions I've ever made.
Oh, wow.
That's great. Oh my gosh.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Heck yeah, it's an adjustment, but it's doable. Granted, I'm in Canada and can only speak for the agency I work with, but they've been great about helping with supports needed. There is funding for food, clothing, Christmas, and birthdays. You can get them to approve a certain number of paid respite hours per week. I have a respite worker for 25 hours per week, which I'm sure as a single parent you can understand is a huge help. And all the youth I've taken in over the last couple of years are always extremely grateful for a stable home. That said, if you decide it's not for you, there's no shame. But if you do decide to do it, I assure you it's worth it. It's obvious you care about the kid, which is probably already more than he's used to. Props to you for considering it. There is an update, so let's just get right into it.
Yeah, and let us know in the comments, would you foster this child or not?
Yeah, what do you think? Update. I just wanted to come on and give an update. I want to say a huge thank you for all the responses. I genuinely didn't expect to receive so many replies, especially to something that was just meant to be a rant to get my emotions out. When I was asked to take in Archie, at first I felt honored. Then I felt worried about everything. I'm quite an anxious person in general, and my thoughts were flooded with concerns about whether I'd be good enough to support Archie in the way he needs. I love my mom, but she didn't help. I think I get my anxiety from her, although she has it on a much higher scale than I do. Every possible thing that could go wrong, she was texting me about all week. You're already stretched thin with work, and Henry, you won't get one-on-one time with Henry anymore. How will you afford everything? These are real concerns, and I'm glad she brought them up because they gave me the opportunity to think about how I could mitigate them. A few of you mentioned the fostering allowance, which I knew about, but I couldn't find any concrete information on how much it would actually be. Every source online seemed to give a difficult answer, but none suggested it was very much. However, as some of you advised, I called the social worker's office and said I was seriously considering taking in Archie, which they were thrilled about. But I needed to understand the finances first to see if it was feasible. They said they couldn't provide exact numbers as every case is different and it isn't decided until a placement is found. However, they told me the minimum would be around 190 euros, about $240 US per week, and that it would likely be completely tax-free. Additionally, I'd receive a significant discount on things like council tax. That was honestly a lot more than I expected and much higher than most of the figures I'd seen online. They also put me in touch with some of the other foster carers who answered my questions, which was incredibly helpful. This week has been very busy. I worked out my finances, added the estimate fostering allowance, and calculated how much Archie would likely increase my expenses. It worked out that I'd actually have a surplus compared to my current situation. Many of the foster carers I spoke to don't work full-time, using the allowance to supplement their income. I'm not sure if I want to do that, but they mentioned it helps to work part-time since fostering involves a lot of work, meetings, reports, and other responsibilities. On top of that, I'd need to complete training during the first year to become fully qualified. I considered that, and with the additional allowance, I could move to a 0.6 contract, working 3 days per week, while still covering the costs of moving to a 3-bedroom house. While that would leave me with a slightly less disposable income, it wouldn't be a significant reduction. I've spoken with my work and they said they would support me if I decided to do this, but I haven't made my final decision. I don't want it to seem like I'm taking advantage of Archie's allowance. After sorting out the finances, I needed to talk to Henry. This was honestly the most important part of my decision. If Henry said no, I would struggle to go ahead with it. I took him out and explained the situation. I didn't go into details of why Archie is going into care, as it's not my story to tell, even though Archie himself has been open about his rough home life. I discussed the potential changes, less one-on-one time, less privacy, at least in the short term while we find a bigger house, and so on. Henry was incredibly supportive. He said that he and Archie had talked about how they both wished Archie could come and live with us. I told him not to mention anything to Archie yet until I had the chance to speak with him, and he agreed. Yesterday, I arranged for social services to come over. Archie, his social worker, and I sat down to talk. They told Archie that he was going to be placed in foster care. Archie cried a lot. I cried a lot, and he asked to see his mom, which the social worker said that they'd arrange as soon as possible. In that moment, Archie didn't seem like a teenager. He seemed like a small child whose world was crumbling. And they asked Archie if he'd want to stay with me. Although he was still distraught about being in care, he said he'd love to stay with me. We discussed what it would mean and how it would affect us. Afterward, Archie and his social worker spoke privately, and then the social worker and I talked. They expressed how thrilled they were about my decision and said that they were pleased I planned to move to a bigger house soon, as Archie would need his own space, which I fully agree with. Normally, the boys spend most of their time upstairs playing Xbox, but later that day, Archie came down and asked if we could watch a movie together. He sat next to me, rested his head on my shoulder, and said, "Thank you for letting me stay with you." Writing this, I can feel tears welling up in my eyes again. I put my arm around him and said I'd always be there for him. By the way, we will always be there for you with stories just like this. Just go to Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or your favorite podcast app. Just search OK Storytime. You can see more stories like this. Today, Archie seems a little down, which is entirely understandable. I honestly expected him to take it harder than he has. To cheer him up, we're going to see the new Lion King movie, even though I hate those live action films, but this is for Archie. And then going out to eat, letting the boys choose where. I might return in a few months to give an update on how things are going. For now, I'm just hoping that everything will be okay. I know the first few months will be the hardest. If you guys have any experience fostering or a similar situation like this, or just supporting comments, comment down below because he's amazing. But that is the end of the story. So let's get on into the next one.